from the GOP's rebuttal to President Biden's State of the Union address. Alabama's junior senator Katie Britt is facing criticism after appearing to suggest President Biden's border policies led to a woman being sex trafficked as a child. That survivor is now speaking out after Senator Britt said this.
I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartels starting at the age of 12. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace.
CNN's Rafael Romo is with us now. And Rafael, you spoke to the woman that Senator Britt appeared to be referring to. What did she tell you?
Brianna, she told me she's upset, she's concerned, and she's also worried about her story being used once again, because this happened in Mexico before, without her permission for political purposes. This is someone I have known since 2014. CNN profiled the story of Carla Jacinto as part of CNN's Freedom Project, which seeks to raise awareness about modern-day slavery. Jacinto says she's very careful about who she gives her testimony to and how and when she does it. So she was very surprised, Brianna. She told me when she found out Saturday that she was involuntarily put in the middle of a social media storm. This storm was prompted by what appears to be the use of her story. We heard it before during the Republican response to the State of the Union address by Alabama Senator Katie Britt. Years ago, Carla Jacinto told me that when she first went public with her story, Mexican politicians took advantage of her for political purposes. I asked her if she feels it has happened again, but now here in the United States, and this is what she told me when I reached her in Mexico City.
Sí, de hecho,
Yes. In fact, I hardly ever cooperate with politicians because it seems to me that they only want an image. They only want a photo. And that to me is not fair.
trabajo como vocera.
I work as a spokesperson for many victims who have no voice. And I really would like them to be empathetic. And I think she should first take into account what really happens before telling a story of that magnitude.
And Brianna, Carla Jacinto also told me that Senator Britt got many of the facts of her story wrong. Number one, she was not trafficked by Mexican drug cartels, but by a pimp that operated as part of a family that entrapped vulnerable girls in order to force them into prostitution. Two, she also said she was never trafficked in the United States, as Senator Britt appeared to suggest. Three, she was kept in captivity from 2004 to 2008 when President George W. Bush, a Republican, was in office as opposed to the current administration, as the senator implied. And finally, four, she met the senator at an event at the border with other government officials and anti-human trafficking activists instead of one-on-one. Jacinto told me, Brianna, finally, no one reached out to her to ask for her permission to use her story as part of a political speech. Someone using my story, she said, and distorting it for political purposes is not fair at all. Brianna?
Yeah, it's sort of very strange. Rafael, thank you so much for taking us through that. We appreciate it. Boris?
Senator Britt did attempt to clarify her remarks on Fox News over the weekend. Here's a clip of that.
To be clear, the story that you relayed is not something that's happened under the Biden administration. That particular person.
Well, I very clearly said I spoke to a woman who told me about when she was trafficked when she was 12. So I didn't say a teenager. I didn't say a young woman, a grown woman, a woman when she was trafficked when she was 12.
CNN political commentator and Republican strategist Alice Stewart is with us now. Alice, so Senator Britt there is denying the fact that she was misleading, talking about the age of the woman that she was talking about. But she did say, quote, "We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country." And then she criticized Biden's border policies. It's clear that she was trying to imply that, to some degree, the White House's immigration policy was at fault and that this happened in the United States. That's misleading.
No question about that. And we can all agree that Ms. Jacinto's story is heartbreaking. It is gut wrenching, and you have to applaud her desire to speak out about this publicly and call attention to human trafficking, which is devastating. But no one should tell her story without her permission, and no one should use her story for political purposes. And her story is not a direct result of Joe Biden's policies. That being said, what Senator Britt did was, just by the implication of that, took away from the real message of this response to the State of the Union. Look, being loose with the truth is not the way to go about doing this when the truth about Biden's border policies are damning enough. His border policies are hurting people. His border policies are to blame for the massive migrant surge, for a lot of sex trafficking, for large part for the death of the nursing student at the University of Georgia, Laken Riley. There are a lot of collateral damage and death and harm to this country based on Biden's border policies. But here's the problem. When Senator Britt got out there and made this statement and using this story without permission from the victim, this was a convenient way for liberals to point out that specific part of the speech and the misleading part of that story, to take away from the bigger issue at hand here, which is the consequences of Joe Biden's border policies. And that's unfortunate. And the bigger part of her story, that Joe Biden is a diminished president, and his policies, whether we're talking about at the border, whether we're talking about the economy, whether we're talking about safety in our streets, have led to an American country that is frustrated with his policies. That goes to show why his unpopularity numbers are at an all-time high, and many people are looking to see him out of office.
The White House would refute much of what you're saying, as I'm sure you know.
Right.
I do want to focus on Senator Britt. Do you think it would help if she apologized to the woman?
Look, I think that's for her to have that conversation between she and that woman. Look, her team is standing by the fact that she was trying to make a reference to the surge of sex trafficking, and making they don't believe that they made a direct connection with regard to the timeline here. I think that's not exactly true. I think all of those involved in the writing of the speech, I think that could have been buttoned up a lot more and really done a better job of outlining the timeline of when she talked to this woman and when this actually happened. But to make a direct allegation or claim that this is the result of Joe Biden when this happened years ago really takes away from the issue at hand. And I think it was an unforced error on the part of this speech, and we're talking about that instead of the real issue at hand, which is